Now, if 6 months ago, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the Prime Minister of Canada, the Prime Minister of Australia, and the European Union would come out and they would say that from now on, all adults that want to use the internet have to show ID or their face. Most people would say, wow, like that's some Chinese level shit. Like, why is the government absolutely terrified of their own population? But if the government says it's in order to protect our children, we, the politician, can no longer stand idly by while children suffer online. Oh, well, that's putting it differently, right? Now, if you disagree, you're for harming the children. I gotta say this. As a Romanian, there is no creepier expression than our children uttered by a politician. It brings, the dark trauma of the past, of the Romanian orphanages, of the abuses that the institutions did in order to protect our children. That it is a word so vile that almost nobody in Eastern Europe dares to utter it. I'm not even kidding. Like, in Romanian, you do not say our children, you say the children, or you say the kids. Even when I happen to go to family gatherings, like when I happen to meet my sister's wife and we, hang around, it's my child over there and her kid, and despite all that, we still say, like, okay, we need to prepare food for the children. Like, it's never our children because nobody else has fucked my wife in order for that person to say our children, right? Like, it implies a level of ownership. It implies that the person who is outside of my family, who is outside of my blood, gets to have a say in the education of my child. And at the same time, it's a one-way street, right? Like, a British person does not get to say about the education of Keir Starmer's child. Like, John, that just happens to live in the boroughs, does not get to go to check Keir Starmer's house about how he is educating his own children, right? But Keir Starmer apparently does get to at least have, like, the moral claim that he is now the father of the nation. He's like Uncle Stalin that, gets to talk about our children as if he possesses them. And the interesting thing is that this is not just rhetoric. I mean, the left is very accurate about the fact that language does matter. Like, inclusive language does have a point. When you start talking like this, you actually normalize the concept. And I want to, talk a little bit about my experiences with discussing issues online. Like, for instance, someone asked me, what's wrong with your kid being trans? And I said, well, my kid has a duty to the family to have a son. In other words, I want grandchildren, right? Like, the burden of my fathers when they raised me was specifically so that I can provide an offspring. And so now the burden of me is so that my offspring gets to continue the family line. This is an obligation older than my name, older than me, that has been entrusted upon me, and now I entrust it on my son. A lot of leftists freak the fuck out. They view it as child abuse. And some of them have even posted Elon Musk's tweet saying that, well, like, children don't get to decide if they are born, and so they cannot consent to being born, and because of that, they have no obligations. And a lot of leftists genuinely believe this. Like, they believe that parents are slaves, that parents should work in order to raise kids, and they, I guess, misconstrued the concept of love with the concept of indulgence. And they believe that a father should actually provide for his child even when he is 25 years old, and that child has absolutely no obligation in return towards the family. I completely disagree. I personally think that if a child wants to be isolated and alone on an island, he has the right, but he doesn't get to ask for support from the mainland, right? So literally what I told him is, like, if my child doesn't want to have grandchildren, that's great, let me know. I insert another coin to continue. I make another child that has more common sense, and that kid gets to be fully independent. The left views that as child abuse, right? Because they do not believe that children have any duty in return to the parents, because they do not consent to being born. However, the same leftists, they believe that every single child has a duty to the state, right? So they don't have a duty to their family, but they have a duty to Keir Starmer and his institutions. In other words, if the government demands taxes, right? Did people consent to be born in the UK? Did people consent to be born in Romania? Absolutely not. But despite all that, you still have to pay to the Romanian government in taxes, or to the British government if you happen to live there, or whatever you are, right? Like, you never consent to these things. If the government decides that, well, the moral thing to do now is to have mass migration, well, now every single citizen has a duty to be moral and to support the mass migration policies. And leftists definitely believe that this is why they promote hate speech laws. Even if, like, there are certain laws or, you know, political parties that maybe people did not consent to, and it just happens because they won the elections, you still have to follow the rules and whatever, you know, the obligations that those parties impose upon the public. Leftists believe this, right? And so, again, notice what leftist ideology is doing. They're basically saying that a child has no duty to his parents, but the child has all the duties to the state. In fact, there were problems in the United States during the Democrats, right? When a lot of parents were upset that the schools were focusing more on the LGBTs rather than the ABCs. And the government, through the rhetoric and through the mainstream media, was comparing these parents to terrorists. In fact, like, this is what actually happened, and it helped Trump get a couple of percentages, because even in liberal states, like, a lot of parents got upset. It's like, hold on a little bit. The teacher is not a second parent. My children do not belong to the state that I happen to be in. Like, just because I happen to fuck a woman while on the country that, you know, was my nation at the time, doesn't mean that that country gets to seize my child. But the thing is, like, there are certain nations in the world that generally do think like this. And conversations like our children absolutely normalizes this. There is no such thing as our children, right? Like, Keir Starmer did not come into my bed to fuck my wife so that we can say our children. No. And the same thing happens with Keir Starmer's children. They're not mine. And the thing is, like, I can kind of understand, you know, like, if you're at a family gathering with your cousins and your second cousins, and my kids happen to be there, and someone else that also has children there gets to say our children, okay, fine. If I'm in a neighborhood and we're discussing about, you know, building a park for our children, right? But when it's a cold institution, like a government, a state, that doesn't even know the name of my child, that never gave any money when I needed. And it's not like Keir Starmer gives me money, right? Like, even if I was a British person, he takes money from other families. He loots money from other people and then, you know, pays in return for child support. But that's not him. That's the other people giving me, right? And those other people probably does not consider our children. And by the way, like, the most vile shit that I have ever seen in my life is when you go on Twitter and you have other people that are childless using the term our children. It's like, motherfucker, how about you go fuck, have a child, and then be part of the conversation? And someone said, oh, well, isn't this identity politics? Isn't it the same like saying, well, unless you're a black woman, you can't talk about black women experiences? It's like, no, you fucking moron. Like, I can never become a black woman, right? So, like, when it's an identity, it's something fixed. But everybody can have children, unless, I guess, you're spayed or some shit, right? But, like, most people can actually choose to have children. This is more like a talking from a perspective of expertise, right? Like, I am more likely to listen to a farmer that actually practices farming than someone that just read about farming on Google and has opinions. Not necessarily like the person that read on Google and has opinions is wrong, but it's more like a waste of my time. Why can't I actually talk with someone that genuinely farms if I want to learn about farming, right? If I want to learn about coding, why wouldn't I talk to someone that actually codes? And so when I want to talk about our children, like, why wouldn't I talk to someone that's genuinely a parent? And the people that aren't parents, they still have an opportunity to become parents if they are so desperate to be part of the conversation. So, you know, like, this is the thing that I hate the most. It's like people that don't have children and say our children. But that implies that despite the fact that they don't have kids, that they view entitled to someone else's. So yes, it's the most creepy thing that a government can say. Our children. Holy fucking shit. Let me know what you guys think, though. And as usual, we'll see each other in the comment section. Take care.